And thank you, Maria. Paul, you and I will not be trying such high difficulty high fives. I have no idea which side you're on, virtually here. But I'll tell you what, I'm glad you're by my side. We've got round one coming up here between Sebastian Pozzo and Luis Scott Vargas. And, these are the top two decks in the format, Paul. So we get a chance to kind of flush things out real early in the tournament here between two high-level players playing the two most popular decks.
Yeah, definitely. And this is one of those matchups where I think a lot of people are favoring the Turns deck, because while the Arclight Phoenix deck is extremely powerful and has a really strong proactive engine, it doesn't have a lot of disruption. And that's really, really important when you're trying to break apart this very powerful combo that this Jeskai Turns deck can present.
That's right. And of course, it doesn't hurt that it's in the hands of Luis Scott Vargas as well. There's two things that jump out, right? When you see a player of Luis's caliber playing a deck like this. The first one is, hey, he's chose to play this deck at the tournament. There must be something to it. You'll see decks like this pop up sometimes on the ladder or maybe on your favorite website or whatever, but they're not real, right? They can do a thing every once in a while, but they're not the type of deck that you'd want to take to a tournament like this. But when you see somebody like Luis playing this, you can also assume that some other people on his team may also be playing it, and you go, oh, well, this is actually real then.
Yeah, and as you can see, both players had somewhat sketchy hands. Luis with the one lander here, but of course going to be leaning heavily on this Brainstorm. Could not find a land off the top here, so now Luis, he needs to find a land here, or else he will Brainstorm lock himself.
He did find a Ralgren Triumph, so a little bit sketchy here, but in addition to that, he's got another Brainstorm plus 2 copies of Expressive Iteration. Sometimes you just brute force with your Brainstorms. He's going to play a tap Triumph here, and then probably just run out the other Brainstorm to dig through his library as quickly as he can.
Yeah, and however, Sebastian's hand is horrible.
Wow,
it doesn't do anything. He mulliganed into a hand that had no Faithless Looting, no Brainstorm, no Iteration, no card draw effects. So the only thing you're really going to see from him here is just a turn 4 hardcast Arclight Phoenix, and that means Luis right now has plenty of time to kind of try to put the pieces together for his combo.
Honestly, it's hard to imagine a draw like this from Pozzo with the density of castable spells at this point in his deck. Having none of them is just bizarre. He does find a Sprite Dragon here at least, so he can get that thing rolling.
Yeah, it seems, already at this point, it looks like it's going to be really difficult for Sebastian to be able to put enough pressure here on Luis. Luis kind of has a lot of the pieces here. He has so many ways to kind of dig through his deck now. Looking to go for the Fire Prophecy here. You saw him hover over that Prismari command, but of course there is the slight chance that Pozzo could have 2 spells, which would turn the Sprite Dragon into a 3/3, which means that the Prismari command wouldn't be able to actually kill the Sprite Dragon.
That's right. Luis also gets to get further into his deck, and he sees the triple Time Warp off of Expressive Iteration. That's actually a bit of a disaster for him. It basically just becomes draw, Time Warp, go. He won't get to hit his land drop at least off of the Expressive Iteration. And the other one going to the bottom is not really a disaster because he's got a passage here anyway, but kind of weird to triple of the same card. You don't see that. Here's Memory Lapse to take care of another Sprite Dragon.
Yeah, it's not ideal because you want all the Time Warps to be in your deck, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you kind of do the combo and get the Velomachus onto the battlefield, what you want to be doing is making sure you hit those Time Warps. Now, at the same time, if you have a Time Warp in your hand, it's really important that you run out the Time Warp before you combo off. That way, when you do get Velomachus onto the battlefield, you have an increased chance of hitting a Time Walk effect, because not only is Time Warp a card that buys you an extra turn, but a Mythic 6 Mastery that you hit off the Velomachus with the Time Warp in the graveyard ensures that you'll have another way to take those extra turns.
It's kind of interesting here. Luis still not having really any pieces of the actual combo set up, but he does have Prismari Command and Magma Opus, so he has the ability to make a treasure, and that means that he's just one top deck away from perhaps getting a Velomachus onto the battlefield. Curious to see if he goes for Prismari Command in kind of a more aggressive way, where he might draw 2, discard 2, and make himself a treasure. That's kind of the most assertive thing he could do at this point. He could also take his time and just start, you know, maybe put a Magma Opus in the yard, get a treasure, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but this is just another turn from Sebastian where he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right? He could have played out a Phoenix, but recognizing that that probably is just not going to get it done, and you're running it into potentially a Prismari command, Sebastian just wanted to find more cards. And he really wanted to find a Faithless Looting there to try to get those 2 Arclight Phoenixes in play. And, you know, I mean, Luis is still just sitting pretty here.
He is.
He's at 16 life, and this is turn 5 against an Izzet Phoenix deck, which can put so much pressure on early.
And they have no threats. Also, Paul, it's really worth noting here that we are now, I was just going to say, we are now at the point where hard casting Velomachus and even hard casting Magma Opus is now on the table for Luis. So now, you know, Sebastian may have just missed his window, right? Like applying no pressure early, Luis is being able to play kind of a normal run out. And now he's got, what, 8, 16 plus another 7, 23 and a Mystics Mastery for 8 if he wants. On top of that, 31 mana worth of stuff in his hand, and it's all super powerful.
And it's really important to note here, I'm sure some people watching would be saying, well, why didn't you just run out of Velomachus? Well, Lightning Axe is a card, right? Lightning Axe is a card. There are 2 copies of Lightning Axe that exist in the Izzet Phoenix deck, so Luis doesn't want to just run out of Velomachus on his turn and get it Lightning Axe. Instead, he's choosing to go for Magma Opus here, right? Put that extra pressure onto the battlefield and then go for potentially a Velomachus. Or, you know what? He can still hold off on it, right? He has a Mystics Mastery. He could just take additional turns if he wants. A lot of options here for Luis.
Yeah, Luis is firmly in the driver's seat. He did have to hold his breath a little bit. Sebastian has 1 copy of Mystical Dispute in his main deck, but he didn't have it, and Luis gets to resolve Magma Opus. Now he's going to run out the Dragon as well with the Memory Lapse in his hand, perhaps giving him a little bit of confidence, although that being said, it looks like it's going to get nailed here by a Lightning Axe. Luis can just say, sure, for you. And look at his hand. I mean, he is in such great shape at this point.
Right. Luis has 8 mana. He can overload the Mystics' Mastery. We already know that there's at least, what, 1 or 2 Magma Opuses in the graveyard. In addition, there's a Time Warp. And you know that's a thing about this deck. What I mean, look at all the gas there in the graveyard. The thing about this deck is even if you don't win with the combo, right? If you just kind of get to the late game, how many decks are going to go over the top of what you're trying to do? You can just get to a point where you're just casting Magma Opus, overloading Mystics' Mastery, and you just can't keep up.
Right. I mean, it is ridiculous if you get to overload a Mastery. I mean, imagine a turn where you get to cast 3 Time Walks, 2 Magma Opus, 3 Brainstorms, 2 Prismari Command. These turns happen. Like, these are legitimate things that can happen with this deck. If Luis felt like it, he could go for it right here. It looks like he's going to hold up Magma Opus instead. But I mean, that's what we're talking. That's a level of power that we're talking about with an overloaded Mystics' Mastery. To me, it's the real all-star of this deck because it allows you to do some of the more actual broken things. Yes, Indomitable Creativity into Lorehold is the sort of the core of the deck. But I'll tell you, Paul, just as often it's turn 2, put a Magma Opus in my bin, make a treasure, play a land on 3, play Mrs. Mastery, play Magma Opus on turn 3. That's really strong too. Cleaning up a board of small creatures or just making a 4/4 drawing 2 cards and doing 4. You know, that's already a huge chunk of value. And if you overload it, it's dumb. I mean, it's really like, it's the most, I would say it's the most powerful thing, you know, single card you can resolve. And, you know, that puts it up against cards like Emergent Ultimatum and stuff that we've seen have, you know, little flashes here or there in Historic. And it's not close. I mean, Mrs. Mastery, you know, mid to late game is way, way better.
Yeah, and Mystics Mastery is one of those cards where just the 4 mana side alone would be a pretty strong Magic card in this format. But the fact that it has the overload built in and the shell that is this deck, I mean, it becomes an unstoppable late game card. You just win the game if it resolves.
It kind of feels like you should get one or the other, but not both, right? Like,
yeah, you know, like every few sets you have those really impressive 8 mana red sorceries that kind of do something ridiculous. That's what Mystics' Mastery is. But it's also got that 4 mana version built in that's also incredibly powerful.
Yeah, this game is going to be over here. Luis gets to fire off Magma Opus here, he can take 0 damage if he wants. He can just kill 2 Phoenixes and then tap 1. But I think he'll probably be okay with killing 2 and just tapping down the last 2 lands here for Pozzo.
Yeah, just
Pozzo's going to have to brainstorm into that one dispute here, isn't he?
Yeah, so if he brainstorms into dispute, I don't know if he played a land, but if he brainstorms into dispute and also a mountain,
yes, he can win.
That would be lethal.
It
he has
be.
one spicy mystical dispute in the main deck, so he does have a chance potentially here. That would be incredible if he can pull that off.
In the meantime, Luis distributing. Oh no, it looks like it's resolved here, Paul. Because he's already put the 2 on there, right?
No, it looks like it's still on the stack.
You're right. No, you're right.
Yeah.
It's on Pozzo. All right, so yeah, my assumption here is he's gonna go for the brainstorm and see. No, it did actually resolve.
Yep, and this is just gonna do it here. Now Pozzo has to keep this creature back on defense, and Luis just
He's going to
has
overload.
He has it all.
Overload it, Luis. Overload, Luis. Yeah.
Style points.
This is mastery. I don't think Pozzo's even going to allow him to look. And there you go. Yeah, that would have taken a few minutes, but it is absolutely absurd. Luis would have been taking 2 extra turns. 3 Magma Opuses would have gone on the stack. 2 Brainstorms. He would have got 2 Expressive Iteration. This is just off the top of my head. And at least 1 Prismari command, all off of that 8 mana. You're not coming back from that one.
Yeah. One thing to note though about that game was it was just kind of it was a highly unusual game, right? Because Luis didn't really combo off, and Pozzo didn't really do anything until turn 4 or 5 of the game. That's not exactly what you want to be doing here, and it's very rare that games kind of play out that way when you're playing this. This isn't Phoenix deck because you just have so much card draw, right? You have so many ways to look through cards, but Pozzo just had such an anemic hand.
Yeah.
I think maybe in his mind, part of the reason to keep that hand, aside from, of course, going to 5 being horrible, is the fact that you have Lightning X, right? You have a way to disrupt the combo. But Luis showed that, look, you don't need the combo.
Right.
You can just play a normal game of Magic.
Speaking of that, Paul, we should really highlight the sideboarding plan here for Scott Vargas, who says, I really don't need the combo. He just boarded out the combo. So he just took out his Velomachus Loreholds and his Indomitables. They're out. They're gone. And he brings in an uncounterable package with 4 Shark Typhoon and 2 Nezahal Primal Tide. So Indomitable Creativity, he actually looks like maybe has left 1 or 2. Let's see. What did he do?
He definitely did some shaving there. Yes. I think that the big thing to note
But he took out Velomachus. That's kind of the key, right?
Right. So the big thing here is when you're playing against a deck that's got mountains in it, it is extremely likely, almost certain, that they're going to be playing the card Fry in their sideboard, right? So because of that, you really cannot rely on your combo being able to seal the deal because you can't protect your Velomachus with counter magic, even if that happens because Fry is uncounterable. So when you think that's going to happen, you can pivot and sideboard in a way where you can now just kind of play the role of a Jeskai control deck instead.
So the Indomitable Creativity just becomes a removal spell?
Did he board in Nezahal by any chance?
He did. He has 2 of them.
So you can Indomitable Creativity for Nezahal, and that's Fry proof.
Okay.
So, and imagine if you have a Nezahal in play. I mean, you're playing against a deck that's just casting a billion spells. I mean,
it gets stupid.
There's some value there, I guess.
It's pretty bad. Anyway, this is awesome, though, and you'll see that the deck's going to play out in a pretty different way. Here's Mystical Dispute taking care of Narset from Sebastian. And, yeah, this is going to be a lot more akin to a control deck from Luis. A Jeskai control deck type build, really just blue-red mainly. But rather than the more combo-focused deck that we saw in the first game.
Yeah. You're going to see this kind of slow down a bit. Also keep in mind, on Sebastian's side, the game plan's also going to kind of slow down a bit because...
Is he going to go for it? No, right?
I doubt it.
He could.
I mean, he could. Your opponent's playing a Phoenix deck that just kept up 4 mana and said go. Very likely that they have some sort of disruption there. And especially because Luis has a perfectly good play in cycling Shark Typhoon for 2 here, I imagine he's going to want to do that instead and just try to develop a board.
I mean, it is interesting because you do have to think about the cards that Pozzo could have. What's up?
So there's also the consideration here of potentially going for an Indomitable Creativity for 2, which allows you to play around at least 1 disruptive spell.
Yeah. Yeah, but what I was going to say is it is interesting when you think about it because, yes, Pozzo gets to bring in some stuff out of the sideboard, but every one of those cards that Pozzo brings in out of the board weakens his primary game plan. He can't go super crazy with it, right? He can't, you know, it's not all removal spells out of the board. If you look, it's mostly sorcery speed stuff. He does have the 2 Fries and the 2 Abrades that he could bring in if he wants. But I mean, you know, he's got Anger of the Gods, Negate, Ether Gust, stuff like that, that Luis doesn't have to worry about quite as much.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the combination of having Ether Gust, Fry, and Brazen Borrowers out of the sideboard means that there should, and a Lightning Axe, if you think that Luis will keep in Velomachus, means that there is a decent number of cards that Sebastian could still have at instant speed that could disrupt the combo.
Yeah.
So I think for that reason, Luis chose to kind of hold off on it.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm just saying it kind of gets interesting because it's not like he's playing a control deck with access to, you know, 50 instant speed stuff. He actually has to, you know, think about what the actual cards are that Pozzo's working with. Interestingly, it looks, I mean, what has Pozzo done here? He's just kind of spinning his wheels. He's getting a Phoenix into play, and looks like it's going to get exiled here, though, so kind of rough beats.
Yeah, and now, I mean, Sebastian only has an island up, right? And there's not a whole lot of 1-mana spells that Sebastian could have here to counter and the Indomitable Creativity here. So I think we're going to see a Nezahal here.
Well, yeah, well, it is a Spire Bluff, so if, you know, Lightning Axe, I guess, is the card he has to worry about, or?
Yeah, I mean, so if Sebastian... Yeah, that is true. That is true. Now, if he does have a Lightning Axe here, he's going to go down to 1 card in hand, which might not be the worst.
That might not be the worst. Let's see what Luis does. It looks like he's content to just sort of sit back.
Okay.
You know, one thing that might be guiding Luis's line of play here is the Memory Lapse in his hand as well, Paul. He may just be setting up to go for Indomitable Creativity on the token and then Memory Lapse as a backup plan. You know, assuming that Sebastian probably doesn't have multiple instant speed ways to deal with the token.
And this is a classic combo that you're going to see a lot of over the course of this weekend, which is the 1-2 punch of Brainstorm into Stormwing Entity, right? We already see Brainstorm into Fabled Passage as a way to basically shuffle away the 2 worst cards in your hand. And now you can just do that by casting the Stormwing Entity and scrying your 2 worst cards to the bottom.
Just going to call it Brainstorm Wing Entity from now on?
Yeah. It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful, but you did shortcut it a little bit. So I'll give you that.
I did. Yeah, that's some good stuff. Those combinations come up. People are playing a lot of entities this weekend, and look at this. We're going to see Memory Lapse actually hit it here.
I imagine you're going to see a dispute here. You know, Luis has so much mana now. You want to just fire this off on anything that's relevant.
Right. We also have to note here that Luis is ticking up his land count. He's already at 6 mana. And, well, there's a few things that come to mind. One of them is hard cast Shark Typhoon. It always comes to mind. You knew I was going there, right? Come on. But there's also just the fact that, you know, you get up to 7, you're in Nezahal, 8 is Mizzix's Mastery, Overload, and he can just start putting stuff on the stack and forcing Sebastian to react. And as we mentioned before, you know, being at its core proactive strategy, the Arclight Phoenix deck actually can't really afford to play that many reactive counterspell type cards in their deck. And so you can often just overwhelm them by
putting. Is it time to opt? I think he's looking for a Lightning Axe here to break this apart.
Is Luis only targeting the token, or is he targeting?
I think he's just targeting his token. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And it looks like it's going to resolve, and there it is.
There's the big boy.
The big whale has arrived on the scene with a splash. It's Nezahal.
Look at this.
Primal Tide. I'll take some cards. Give me those cards. Wow.
Oh, man.
This is where Luis goes, okay, you get to go nuts for a turn, but he's at 20, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, even the best turns from Pozzo are going to have a hard time getting in for 20 damage here. So Luis has got to feel pretty good in this situation. And again, part of the description of the best turns from Pozzo is him casting a lot of spells, and Luis is just going to have infinite resources.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, it looks like it's snack time for Scott Vargas as well. He's feeling confident.
yeah, I mean, you know, when you're at 20 life and you're playing against an all spells deck and you have
He's breakfast burritoing, Paul.
you have a
I'm
not a
kidding.
surprise.
Yeah.
Not a surprise at all.
He just busted out the breakfast burrito. I guess that means that he thinks he's winning. Is that what we're supposed to take from this?
I suppose.
I mean, if I was nervous about losing, I don't think I would. I'd probably still want a breakfast burrito. Who are we kidding? But
Consolation burrito. Come on.
oh, that's yeah. But that would be after I lost, you know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, he's found the fry too. If you know, maybe that storming entity presented some kind of a threat here, but he's got the answer here in the fry as well. He's got the memory lapse, just basically has it all.
Yeah. Expressive iteration off the top here for Pozzo is actually, you know, one of the cards he'd like to see. I wouldn't be surprised if Luis just responds with Fry here. You know, with the prowess triggers up, it can be astute to make sure you get that Fry in early.
Yep.
And there we go, Storming Entity down. And that really is going to make life impossible here for Sebastian Pozzo.
I wonder if he wants the memory lapse here just to
Seal the deal.
just to prevent some unfortunate sequence of cards here that would allow Sebastian to kind of come back. But at the same time, you could always just lapse what he looks to find here off the iteration.
And that seems to be what Luis has decided as well. There's the one of Crackling Drake. We've seen people shave those over and over. It started off as actually one of the critical cards, but now people are down to one copy of it for the most part. And there's the memory lapse. And
That should do it.
Should just about do it here. Yeah, Nessa Hall takes bites out of your opponent's life total like Luis is taking bites out of that burrito. 7 power. It is quick. It humps your life total real good. And basically impossible to kill as well. There's all the lands for Luis off of the Brainstorm. He's going to drop down to 13. And
Ooh,
I think he's
graveyard
going to look
check.
maybe he's got a Prismari command to seal the deal here.
I don't see that.
Doesn't look like it though.
Yeah.
So he gets to play with his food a little longer, perhaps.
Yeah, there's no, you know, time warp type effect. The other option is to just keep up Shark Typhoon here,
Yep.
right? And just make it so that Sebastian can't somehow kill you with a Sprite Dragon that just becomes enormous.
Right. So there's Crackling Drake as a 10-4, and then a hard cast Arclight Phoenix, and
Okay.
that
That
is
should
good
do
news
it.
for Luis Scott Vargas.
As we now have a tapped out Pozzo, we're gonna have a shark devouring this Sprite Dragon, much the way that Luis is devouring his burrito here.
Humph.
And yeah, and now he can Mizzix's Mastery back the Scorching Dragonfire, get that Arclight Phoenix off the battlefield, and get in for a lethal attack.
And there's the one of miscast for funsies. But there it is again. Interestingly, both games ending the same way here. And that's Mizzix's Mastery with Overload. And I gotta say, that was a beating by Luis Scott Vargas. The first time that we got to see this deck on camera is the first round of the tournament here, Paul. And we saw Manny say he felt very confident that this is going to be one of the better decks based on its win percentage on the ladder. And boy, did it look good here.